Welcome back, everyone, to Finding Common Battlegrounds. We have a new episode for you. And for those who can't see the video, you're probably not going to be able to tell, I guess, right? But we're actually all here together in person.
In the flesh.
In the flesh. We're in Tom's, what do you call this place? It's kind of a converted garage.
Yeah, it's a converted garage. It is sometimes called the Fornication Fort or the Pleasure Palace, but
Oh, interesting.
yeah.
I thought it was the kids' room, but like that puts it in a completely different light.
Wow, I had no idea what I was entering into. Great. Okay. So
Don't run a black light in here.
I'm just intrigued who's doing the fornicating in the fornication room, but awesome. So we are back with another episode for you. And delighted to be here in Utah. So I did come out to Utah. I'm here for the holidays. We're recording this on December 19th. Yeah. And I'm here for like a week and a half, and we figured we'd get together and do a fun podcast.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Quick shout out to our sponsor. I did in fact just bring 2 bidets to Utah to our winners from our last competition. So Lux Bidet.
Heck yeah.
Supporting our listeners and keeping them clean, which is what we're all about, right? We like this.
Nice.
Yeah. Quick recap on what we're doing here. Finding Common Battlegrounds. It's a podcast trying to bring the left and the right together. And our new format basically has both of them critiquing specific things happening, but the critiques happen. One happens from the left, one happens from the right. Our 2 participants are relatives. So we have Tom Triplett representing the conservative side, and we have Nate Triplett representing the progressive side. And let's ask a fun question just to get to know you guys a little bit better.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. So let's try your favorite food. That just came to me. Favorite food. And this is terrible for Tom because I know Tom he struggles to pick out food. So let's start with Nate. Do you have something?
So my go-to is always going to be pizza. Like you can never go wrong with pizza. I know that's like the easy answer, but I'm never going to say no to pizza.
Okay, but like, are you a deep dish guy? Are you like a Chicago, New York? Like, there's a lot of variation in pizza.
Variations of pizza. I'm not a deep dish guy.
No,
I'm not a thin crust either. It's got to be like the perfect ratio of like good thick crust, but not too much crust, if that makes sense.
I get it.
Just like your standard, if you go to your local pizza place, like more than likely they're going to have my ideal type of pizza.
But like a chain one or not a chain one, or doesn't matter?
I would prefer it to be a local pizza place, but you know, you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong with, there's pretty decent chains out there. I like Marco's Pizza. I'll say I like Marco's quite a bit.
But like a Little Caesars, sorry, they're not a sponsor of the podcast, so you can totally go after them.
I mean, hey,
you'd eat it.
I'll eat some Little Caesars. It's never going to be a first choice.
Got it.
But I can get 10 of those for the price of
That's
how much?
true.
Yeah.
I
mean, they're not $5 anymore, but
I know, but still,
thanks, Joe Biden.
They are cheap. Tom, can you answer this one? Because this is
no, not really. I'm food agnostic. So there's 3 things I do not have any interest in, and that is food, music, and sports. So.
Nothing. Well, you watched the World Cup. We didn't talk about the World Cup.
What do you have interest in then? I mean, I understand
other things,
but food and music is like the lifeblood of life.
Well, so, I mean, giving a little history here, Tom and I have been friends for a very long time, and we've done a lot of hiking together, and that's necessitated a lot of travel. And this is how I knew as soon as I asked the question, I was like, oh, crap, I should have come up with something different. Every time we go to a restaurant when we're out doing one of our crazy hikes, Tom requests that we order his food for him. Has he ever done this for you, Nate?
I don't think I've ever had that experience with
Tom.
No?
I've ordered more food for Tom than I think I've ever seen Tom order. That's kind of strange.
For sure.
He lets me order his food. And I'm kind of, I wouldn't say I'm food agnostic. I like a lot of food, but it is kind of interesting. All right. So
I would never let somebody order food for me.
No,
I would let somebody recommend food.
Sure.
But I would never let them just like blindly order me food.
As soon as I have gotten a job anywhere, one of the first things that just sort of emerges is a designated food order that like when we're going to lunch, that like, oh yeah. And then they just know the drill.
Like I will order Tommy's food because otherwise we'll be here forever.
All right.
So, okay. Anyway, just getting to know our participants a little bit, and we're going to jump into our first topic today. Just a little bit, maybe a little bit delayed, but I think they're still really relevant and pretty fascinating. So our first topic is why was the Biden administration wrong to bust the railroad workers union? So a little bit of background here. Basically, there are a number of unions. So I should probably rephrase that. There are actually a number of railroad unions, and they were debating over a contract, right, with the owners of the railroads, and they had reached some agreement. The Biden administration had actually stepped in to try and negotiate an agreement, in part because you shut down the railroads, you shut down commerce in the US, right? The railroads do make a huge difference. So the Biden administration had gotten involved, but one of the big sticking points was sick leave, paid sick leave. And the railroads were not giving this to the unions. The unions were holding out for it, and it was eventually going to lead to a strike, which would shut down commerce in the US. And because of some legislation that was passed a long time ago, the Biden administration, so the executive branch of the government, has the power to step in and prevent a railroad strike. So they did. They stepped in, they prevented the strike, and kind of forced the unions to accept a contract. I don't know if you guys caught this, but the House tried to actually, when they approved this, they tried to slide in a package giving them a week of paid vacation, and it didn't pass.
Sure.
Yeah. So that was pretty interesting. It didn't pass through the House, right? So that just recently happened. I mean, it's in the last month or so. So that's the topic today. Who wants to start?
I mean, you started both times last time, but I do feel like I have a lot to say about this one. And so I'm very curious. I don't know if I want to start. Okay. I have a lot to say about this. I have a lot to criticize the Democrats for on this one. Specifically the way that Biden has talked about it. Biden has repeatedly said while campaigning and tweeted that he is a very pro-labor president. I wanted to say that he said he's the most pro-labor president in modern history, but that sounds like something Trump would say. Yeah. I don't think actually Biden said that. The most pro-labor president ever. Yeah, I don't think he actually said that, but he has constantly spouted about how pro-labor he is, and how on the campaign trail and while kind of gearing up for the midterms. And I think it's very indicative of the Democratic Party in general, of they love to say things, and then when it comes to actually voting, and when it comes to voting records, when it comes to actual action, they don't back up what they say, right?
Right. Border wall.
Yeah, the border wall. Exactly. That's a whole nother concept I don't want to get into right now, because I have thoughts about that. But you have Biden who's talking about we need to support the rail workers, and we need to support labor in the US, especially gearing up to the midterms. The midterms turned out a lot better for the Democrats than we expected it to. That red wave never came. It's going to be our second topic today. Yep. And as soon as that happened, Congress goes through and Biden kind of eats his own words. Congress goes through and forces the rail workers to actually take the contract, which goes in the face of everything that really he had said. So I have a lot to criticize there. I think that the Democratic Party will always put profits in front of people. And I will continually criticize the Democrats for that. I have some other things I want to say, but I'll let Tom jump in there.
Tom. Okay.
Yeah. Well, first off, I'll just go off that thought. Profits. I mean, you could say that, like, if the railroad had gone nuts, right, that would have really hurt Democrats. Or if that had hurt the economy, that would have really hurt Democrats, right?
Sure.
So
agreed.
They're looking out for their interest, right?
Yep.
So here's the thing. This is an easy one. Last week was easy, or the last podcast we did was really easy as well for me, because like this one is like market forces, baby, right? Let a strike happen. So like I agree. You should have just let that thing play out, because this is the labor, the union worker. This is their nuke button, right? Is the strike, and this has been going on for hundreds of years, right?
I mean, as laborers, it's literally the only lever that you can pull.
Well, it's the biggest. It's the biggest.
It is the biggest.
It's the biggest.
That's
the most
potent. Yes,
sure.
And it's always that threat, right? Of like, well, we could, and it's like I'd probably say 90% of all like proposed strikes never happen, right? Because you can build up to it and then it doesn't happen. And it's like that's part of the game, right? Because it's like because here's the thing, everything is
Interesting.
it's
Part of the
all
game.
it's all free market. You can those employers could fire everybody and get new employees. It would be a huge pain in the butt. It would be
Yep.
horrible PR. It would be all this stuff, but like that's part of the game, right? And it's like everyone's going to weigh out the consequences and the actions, and this is all the thing. And yes, it actually really, I think it's stupid and annoying when a president comes in and goes, nope, I'm going to force you to work, right? And this has happened many times where I think there was a post office strike. It was like 100 years ago where the president stepped in and was like, nope, you can't. And they forced them to do these things. And I think that is folly, right? Unless there's an issue of national security at risk, it's like that's you're tampering with market forces. You never should do that. And
that's an interesting perspective, because like I would never really, I don't agree with market forces. I think that market forces never work in favor of us as the people. I think that market forces always operate in the best interest of companies, and giant companies specifically. And I think the biggest part of the conversation,
you're like, the game is rigged kind of a thing.
What I'm looking at, absolutely. I think it's all rigged towards corporations, because we talk about, well, what are the ramifications if the rail workers go on strike, right?
Yes.
Well, it is going to completely devastate the economy for weeks or months until we recover for that.
I heard it was like
estimated
$2 billion a day. Yeah.
Insane.
Yep.
And why is the conversation? And when I read news articles about this, and I listen to media pundits, why is the conversation not more geared towards making the workers go back to work and forcing the company to take the contract?
Not supporting the workers side of the argument.
It's never pro labor.
And
so that's where that overall frustration comes out at the Democratic Party, and specifically Biden. You will see a friend of mine was explaining this to me recently, called the horseshoe effect in Washington, where when you take the polar ends of the political spectrum, when you look at politicians like Bernie Sanders and a Marco Rubio, they tend to vote closer than a lot of Bernie Sanders and the Democrats do, right? Yeah. When you look at the senators who actually voted against essentially forcing the workers to take the contract, Bernie Sanders voted for that. So did Marco Rubio. So did Ted Cruz. A lot of Republicans who I vehemently despise were on the side of labor in this situation.
But in that instance, were they on the side of labor, or to Tom's point, were they on the side of, if they strike, it hurts the economy and hurts Democrats? Do you see what I'm saying? So were they really on the side of like, oh, no, we care about workers' rights? Or was it like, oh, this will clobber Democrats?
Oh, I don't think that they care about workers' rights at all. It's about the overall, how will this impact the economy? The economy. And then how will it affect politics? How will it affect Democrats?
Yeah, will trickle down to them.
Okay. And to your point, Tom, just again, like following up with this a little bit. So you were saying like, let the market forces play out, but you recognize that neither group's really willing to do that. Whichever group's in power doesn't want to do that because it'll affect them politically.
Hurts.
Yeah. Right. So, but when you say let the market forces play out, like, what do you really mean by that?
Here's the thing. Yeah, let it play out. Here's the thing. If we'd gotten to the 11th hour, because I think it was scheduled for the December 9th. Yeah. So like it's December 8th. Well, who capitulate? Like the more than likely the employers, right? And if Biden was like, this is a sacred cow, I'm not going to touch this, who do you think Biden's going to be putting pressure on? The workers or the employer? Like, give them what they want, guys. Just give them what they want. If we're like, we're just gonna let this play out, like honestly, that's more pro worker, right? Is letting it play out, because it's like I said, it's the nuke button. It's the biggest nuke button they have, and if they're going for it, it's like, let them do it.
I agree. We should have let it. He should have let it play out. The Congress should have let it play out. It technically didn't get to Biden, right? I believe the last step was if Congress either deadlocked on it or didn't pass it, then Biden had one extra level that he could have a trigger. Essentially, he could have pulled it's not technically an executive order, but could have passed that legislation at that point to force them to take the contract.
Yeah.
And I believe that he absolutely would have had it come to that.
Right.
So at some level, I mean, it actually does sound like Tom is saying here that if we had let it play out, it would be beneficial for the workers.
I think so.
It's a very pro-union stance.
I know, which is kind of,
you say that you're pro-union?
Pro-market. Well, the unions,
That's
unions
what I
are
want
part,
right now.
unions are part of the market equation, right? It's like
Not really.
when there's employers, this is what.
Not in the United States. Not how they be.
Well, no, this is all part of it, right? This is the levers they can play, if they can pull in a free market, right? There's no unions. There's no unions in Russia, right? There's no unions in North Korea. That's what I'm saying. Like,
that's true.
I mean, if we use that as our bar of excellence, man, the United States is amazing all the time because at least we're not North Korea, at least we're not Russia. So
Right.
like,
okay, but
I'm just
okay,
saying,
so let's
that
moderate
can't
that
be
a little
our
bit, right?
bar.
So like France has powerful unions, right?
Yes.
And actually, let's use the UK right
Yeah,
now
okay.
because the UK literally they're having strikes in their healthcare system right now.
right.
yes.
So that's happening right now, and they just called up a bunch of reservists to step in to staff some of the hospitals because they're shutting things down.
Right.
Right. But in that case, like, what do you mean when you say unions are part of the market? Explain that, and
Yeah.
maybe don't just use the US. Like, let's go with a slightly more socialistic country like the UK, where they do have a universal healthcare system.
Sorry, did you
and
just call the UK a slightly more socialistic
than the US?
country?
Than the US.
Fair.
Yes,
Every
yeah.
every country then. Fine.
Not every country, but most countries. Yes.
All right. All right.
Well, yeah, and that's the problem is when you get more socialistic, it's less free market, right?
Right.
These
more
unions
regulated.
actually have a lot of protections.
Yes.
And so it's less of so yeah, it to me it's not as fair of a comparison. Whereas in the US, it's like, yeah, we shut it down and you got to deal with it. It's so do you want to not do that? Right. And that's what I'm saying. Most strikes never happen. It's a bargaining tool, right?
I would argue that
And I think Biden did everyone a disservice by saying, now you can't strike. And they're like, you just took away our biggest tool, right?
Yeah.
Our biggest.
He did.
the
it's like-
free market that you talk about and can't and does not exist, because you cannot have a completely free market that exists outside of regulations. We've proved this because not that we've tried completely removing regulations, but since the era, we've been slowly and very quickly actually removing a lot of regulations in the market forces. And we've seen what that's done for growth, seen what that's done for individual labor, and then what that's done for individual people. And so when I'm saying we don't have necessarily a free market, is there have to be protections in place for people, for workers, so that companies just cannot just band together and monopolize and outcompete and exploit workers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so if we're being really kind of technical here, of course, when capitalism first developed, it was truly a free market and the protection workers, right?
That was laissez-faire.
And unions are what actually shifted all of this, right? So it was the unions that got the regulation saying, oh, we're going to protections in place, so it's a safer work environment, right? So unions actually did introduce the regulations, and I don't think we're ever going to go back to that kind of laissez-faire
Absolutely
capitalistic system.
I'd hope not.
Would you agree with that?
I think we've just changed.
Well, I think to parrot you, the U.S. is becoming more socialist all the time, right? So we're socialistic, right?
Yeah.
So like,
Whoa,
I agree.
we
Push
are
back against that. The U.S. is not pushing left. Are we talking
in what
socialism from the definition of an economic standpoint?
Well, I mean, you can clarify, Tom, if you want to, because I
use a loaded term like socialism, right? And socialism means a lot of different things.
It does mean a lot of things.
Especially how we use it in the US, but like socialist organization of the economy.
Yep.
We are not even close to socialist in the US.
Sure.
The government doing things is not socialist, right?
We actually have a lot of stuff that is socialized in the US, right?
Sure.
So our public schools are socialized.
Absolutely.
The postal system is socialized. We actually have some socialized medicine, right? So through the VA and then a variety of other systems.
For politicians.
Our military is socialized, our police, a lot of these systems are socialist. We just don't like to call it that, right?
Sure.
So in the US, we're so pro-capitalist that we're like, no, we're not. Well, actually, like huge segments of our economy are already socialized. It's just not the specific, like the part of the economy that actually sells stuff, right, for the most
Sure.
part, is not. Whereas it is more that way in some other countries, right? So you'll get like South Korea, where they invest in Hyundai, right? So the government actually owns a sizable chunk of that car manufacturer.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I'm not saying we're very socialistic. I'm just
Right.
saying we've been going more and more, so like we're getting more like the Affordable Health Care Act, right? Things are becoming more socialistic over time. Like we keep
Those are social programs.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, which are they're
like-
introducing
it's like
industry
socialism
into
light.
socialist.
Like
Sure.
socialism light.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
and I'm saying I'm not seeing any initiatives that are desocializing us, right? We're only moving more socialistic. So
And you might disagree in terms of regulation, but regulation isn't necessarily socialism per se. It's regulation of industry.
Right. No, it's not socialism
But it's
at
not
all. There's
socialism.
regulation has nothing to do technically with socialism, right?
Yeah.
I just don't feel like the protections are in place that need to exist, specifically bring it back to labor movements, right?
Mhm.
When we're talking about workers having protections and having bargaining power in place, one of the only things you can do as a worker is band together with your other workers and decide, hey, we're going to work, we're going to not.
Right.
If you don't, we're not asking, the rail workers in this scenario weren't asking for anything crazy. They were asking for sick leave,
Yes.
additional sick leave, because they have little to none at the moment. I don't remember
I don't think they have
exactly.
any.
I
don't
want
think
to
they
say
have
there's
any.
no sick leave,
They have
right?
they have paid like vacation. So there's like a certain amount of
They
paid
do,
vacation,
yes.
but not
But
sick
actual
leave, not
sick
paid
leave.
sick leave. Yeah.
And so when we want to talk about protecting the economy, when we want to talk about keeping the economy together, part of that is providing sick leave for workers, for especially such crucial workers like our rail workers. But we can't do that. We can't do the bare minimum of that. And it's always a band-aid reaction to, well, it's come to worst case scenario of, hey, workers are going to strike. It's going to shut the economy down. Let's force them to go back to work. And then we'll just pretend like everything's back to normal. The Democrats will go back to status quo and we'll all pretend like we're on our way. It wouldn't be that big of a lift to put those protections in place. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent there.
So I do want to slightly complicate this, and then we're going to move on to our next topic. But as you two were talking about this and talking about like some of the earlier strikes that had happened, one that kind of kicked into my mind is in the 1980s, Reagan broke a strike among air traffic, right? Which is interesting because I would say like railroads are critical infrastructure. I think that's fair, but they're all privately owned, right?
Correct.
So the railroads are privately owned, even though they've got all sorts of like complicated government relationships, but they are privately owned.
Mhm.
But air traffic controllers actually work for the federal government,
Right.
right? That's not a private industry. That is federal employees. They do have a union, but he busted the union and forced them to go back to work,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Is that a different situation than what we're talking about
It's
now?
weird. So the employer actually is the government.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So that is strange, right? How does that work? And what rights do they have? And like that, obviously I'd be like, you try to make it as capitalistic as possible and you let them do what they want to do, right? But I don't even know if he was just working off, if he had some sort of legislation, like a precedent legislation, or if he was just saying, nope, executive order, right? I don't know what it was, but I would, if it was just executive order, then I'd say shame on him, right?
I don't feel like that changes anything personally. I don't think that it changes whether or not, at the end of the day, you have workers who are asking for and demanding better conditions and are saying, hey, in order for us to continue working and providing our labor in the way that we are now, you have to condition, which is either more pay, sick leave. It usually isn't a huge ask.
So I
I don't think it's any different whether they're employed by a private institution or whether they're employed by the government.
But you're agreeing that like the government taking away or forcing a settlement, in this case with the railroad, it screwed the workers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He agrees.
And-
And you think the same.
Yes, and that it would have been in the best interest to let for the workers who have not even to strike, but to have the option to strike,
Right.
the threat
To not,
strike, right?
not have that taken away.
Yes.
Which is what Biden.
It's like you just neutered their greatest tool, and so the employer's like, yeah, I'm not going to pay out. It's like,
Absolutely.
I don't have to do jack
Interesting.
squat.
So we're finding agreement,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like
So-
both of you are basically the Biden administration, like took the greatest weapon that the workers have, right?
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
The labor force has away from them, and allowing them to at least have the threat or actually striking would have been in the best interest of the workers.
Yeah, absolutely.
For
And
sure.
who votes for him at the end of the day? The workers.
Yeah, that's fascinating. We agree, even though we came at it from, I think, rather different perspectives.
Yeah.
Right.
Strange finding common ground.
Okay. Interesting.
Isn't that weird? Okay, we're moving on to our next topic, unless you guys have anything else to add, because I thought that was actually real interesting. I didn't know where you were going to come from, Tom. I kind of knew where you were coming from. This day. Like, yeah, I got that, but okay. So our second one, it is like we're like a month and a little bit out away from this now, but I do think it's fun to kind of reflect on
Yeah,
what
people have
happened.
moved on past the midterms. They're like,
I-
that
I-
was,
they
that was
essentially
crazy.
have, right? So there's some fun, kind of interesting questions we can wrestle with here. So, generally speaking, we have the midterm elections. They're historically the party that's not in power makes gains during those midterm elections, right? Typically, that's typically what has happened. And that massive red wave that people were prognosticating was going to happen.
The red tsunami.
Yes, it did.
Polls
It
were
did
showing it
not
was
material.
coming.
It did. It did. It did materialize in Florida where it does.
It was
but
like a
we're not gonna
red.
talk about
It was like a
Florida.
red puddle.
Yes, it was. It was a little tiny, like, yeah,
When
tiny
we put
little
on
red.
our blue boots and stepped on.
Yeah. So the question is, how are Republicans, and you can talk about specific ones if you want, we didn't specify, but
Mhm.
how are Republicans responsible for the smaller than expected term red wave?
Yeah, let me start. I don't understand this because I'd rather just make this a discussion.
Mhm.
But I mean, like, by all like intents and purposes, this was a disaster. Like, because I think Herschel Walker lost
He did
in
lose.
Georgia,
Yep,
and
he
I think we're
Even in the runoff.
51,
Yes.
51 Senate in the Senate, and although
Senator just went independent.
yeah, went independent.
so to speak.
but
Yeah.
she's probably
She's gonna
fairly
continue to caucus with Democrats.
exactly yeah.
Cinema's gonna grift.
And and she's in she's got to watch, she's looking out for herself, and so
Shocker.
I think so, like, yeah, like that didn't turn out, and we got the House, but like not by nearly a margin that
It's not a
Republicans were
massive
expecting.
margin.
Yes.
Right.
And so yeah, horrible. And like the thing was, it's like it was leading up, and I'm watching the stories, and people were like, it was like, red tsunami, and they were like, and I'm like, we're getting a little overexcited here. I'm worried that this is not going to turn out the way that it's almost like the Hillary Clinton. You're like, yeah, we got that right, and you're like, anyway. So like,
Technically, we won't go there though.
yeah, we were like, I don't know. Like, I was like, I don't know if it's going to turn out, because people are getting crazy about this. They're like, we're going to get 54 seats in the House, in the Senate, and we anyway. So it was like, yeah, totally did not turn out. And like, so like, what happened? I don't know, right? I don't know, because yes, they usually do pretty well, and like the few things I can point to
You
is
don't know, but here's your turn
Yeah,
to
this is your
speculate.
yeah. Here's my
Right?
speculate. It is, I think. Well, I'm just like, I really like. I thought about it. I'm just like the abortion thing
Probably hurt him.
probably hurt, right? To what extent? I didn't think it actually was this huge, enzyme that that the Democrats got people to gather to. It didn't seem to be as big as Democrats wanted it to be. So
Yeah.
so that it was like, I'm sure that affected things, but just I don't know what accounted for everything. The only other thing is like, is this a referendum on Trump and MAGA, right? And sort of like, and I know Ryan had talked about this before, that a number of MAGA supporters had become the primary candidates,
Yep.
right, for office.
So
And
they won in the primary because
Yeah.
they bifurcate. Yep.
yeah, and then they, and then this was like a referendum on it, like, no, we don't want you MAGA candidates in there, and so like,
Yeah.
was that most of it? I don't know.
I don't
I
think so.
haven't even heard an analysis of like what the H happened, right? And like from anyone, just like, yeah, we got a shellacking. Oh, well.
Which, I mean, technically Republicans did take the House, right?
Yeah,
Small
we
margin,
won.
but they took the House.
We
right?
made gains,
You
but
made
not.
gains, and in some interesting places. In New York State, you made gains.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not necessarily, I don't know if you identify as a Republican. We're saying you're conservative, right? But you
No,
may be
I'm a
independent.
Republican,
You are
yeah.
a Republican, okay. But they made gains in New York State and California, which I thought was really interesting. In fact, the last seat that was decided was in California, and Republicans picked that up.
Hmm.
So I was surprised where they did make those gains. I mean, it's
Sure.
obviously rural New York and rural California where they're making those gains, which makes a lot of sense, but it was a little bit surprising.
Yeah, I think the places where Republicans thought they were going to clean up didn't materialize. Like we
Yeah.
thought would. Yeah.
What are we thinking?
I have some thoughts. I think generally, as based in 2016 and continuing to determine that polling, the way that we do polling currently is not accurate.
It's not.
It's
perfect.
not, it's far from perfect, but it's very far from accurate at this point, because polls were showing that Republican supporters, voters were going to come out in droves and
Mhm.
vote Republican. But a big part of how what wasn't accounted for was the young vote, like the Gen Z vote, right?
Right.
18 to 29
Yeah.
is the metric. And they came out in,
You're saying they were the wild card, or what?
well, I don't think that polls are accounting for that demographic.
They're hard
The
to
main way that polling is done in the United States by political campaigns is via the phone.
Mhm.
And like, do you have 18,
right,
they couldn't be caught dead answering a phone call.
right,
Right?
from a number they don't know.
I'm 27. If somebody calls me on a number I don't know, no chance I'm going to answer that phone call.
Do you answer those, Tom?
Yeah, I will.
So do I.
I have to, because I have a job where people call me from
Oh,
my
really?
number. So I do have to answer the phone. But I wouldn't be caught dead if I'm like off the clock.
So I've gotten much better. Total tangent, right? But I've gotten much better at, like, when you hear that pause, and then
Yeah.
you know that it's somebody trying to sell you something. So I'm immediately.
So what I do is
Just
I say hello, and then I don't hear anything, and I'll just sit there, and then because they'll wait, and then they're like, "Hello," and I'm like, yeah.
Nice.
Okay, but I do answer. Okay,
Yeah,
keep
yeah.
going. Sorry,
And
quick tangent.
my point being that like they're not counting. And so that's one factor.
Yeah,
Polls are completely
their
off.
polling strategies aren't for the younger generation.
Absolutely, which I think has
That's
created
interesting.
this false confidence in Republicans. And
So you're saying they're not the younger vote would probably be more liberal, and
Mhm.
they're probably as they usually are, and so they're not accounted. They weren't getting accounted into the polling,
Yeah.
and therefore it was leaning more conservative than it should have.
exactly. I think on that same metric, like media and polling is heavily skewed by media influence as well. So in the sense of like, when I look at empirical data, polling data, even if that data isn't necessarily correct, when I'm looking at the data, I can choose on how I want to report on that data or how I want to present that data. And media companies overwhelmingly in the US do lean right, skew right. The biggest news corporation in the US is Fox News.
Where's Josh when I need him? Man, he would lose his mind.
Oh,
when
he
you
would
say
die,
this.
'cause he
was-
thinks
they're
everything's
all
left.
left. They're all
Yeah.
to the left. It's such a left wing. Be bias. It's so to the left. It's
Sure.
fascinating that he's like, no, they're all to the right.
Sure, and of course that is my bias. I recognize that, but the number one political media company is Fox News, and the number one political show, as much as I hate it, is a white supremacist named Tucker Carlson. These facts, the way that the news is distributed in that way, with a very heavy right-wing bias, does skew our perception of when we think this red wave is going to come in, because that's what we're hearing and that's what we're seeing all of the time.
You're saying they're an echo chamber, like they're
Oh,
basically
absolutely.
hearing. They're only surveying people that are going to reflect their views.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Now, that doesn't mean that everybody is going to agree with it or everybody consumes Fox News, but we all do like exist within our own echo chamber. I think that those are a couple things that contributed to it. And I think that overwhelmingly the Republicans are the minority party within the US. Republican conservative policies are less popular across the board than what you'd consider progressive policies.
Based on polling data.
Technically based on polling data. So, you know,
Sorry, I'm a survey
technically,
researcher.
100%, that's 100% skewed. So what was my point I was trying to make there? I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
But
Well, the thing I would say is that because we don't see that tendency, right? Of like that on election day, it ended up being much more democratic than we've been polling, right? Because we've seen it flip both ways.
Well, that's
So,
what I was, one of the
I
points
don't
that I
know.
wanted to bring up is in the 2016 election, the polls went the other way.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
So everybody was like, Hillary's going to win. We got this in the bag. Not a pro. And then suddenly there's a red wave and Trump wins this. Right. So
I don't disagree that could have been the issue.
Sure.
In this polling cycle, right? This midterms, but it seems like it's gone both ways, at least
Right.
at one point.
and
it's
well, I was just going to say, like, during that one, they talked about how maybe there were kind of slightly conservative individuals who were less likely to take the phone calls, right? So there's just a lot of speculation on
I
like
heard
how the polls got it wrong.
There was like a MAGA,
like a secret MAGA contingent. or
yes.
something.
Well, they were shy. They
didn't
call
want
it?
to
It was
admit
like
it.
the what was the silent MAGA or something like that. Like they were supported, but they didn't want to like be vocal about it.
yeah.
Yeah.
They love
sleeper MAGA. Is
Sleeper
what they
MAGA.
call it.
Yeah, the right loves to pretend like they're the oppressed minority, but they are a minority. They're just not oppressed. Okay, so back to I got my train of thought
so it's
back
Got
in the sense of I just lost it again. Gosh dang it. I keep making a point and it's getting me off of the
well,
point
when
I'm
you
trying to
finally
make.
drop it, it better be that good.
Yeah,
that's
Well, okay, so it does make me think like, okay, we're saying polls aren't catching young people because they're not, going to answer the polls. And I get that. And we can talk about like, there are some independent polling groups, right? Some are affiliated with universities. Not all of them are associated with big media companies. And they try and weight things. They try, again, I'm a survey researcher at some level. So I know that there's a lot that goes into trying to actually get these polls as accurate as possible. Why were the polls wrong? I don't know that we have the answer to that. The other thing that I was going to mention, maybe we're not catching young people, but we also don't do a lot of these polls in multiple languages.
Yeah.
So if we have, first generation immigrants, people who don't speak English, we're not going to pick them up. So unless you're doing polling, particularly in Spanish as a second language, right, or first language, but there are lots of other groups of people out there who might be different in how they're doing this. So just some thoughts as we're thinking about like why the polls might be wrong. But I have some other questions for you guys too. Did you get it?
I did get it back.
Okay.
So kind of going back to the skewing of data and polling by media companies, the other challenge we have in the US is you can vote on ballot provisions within your state, but overwhelmingly we are not voting policy by policy, right? We are voting for elected officials that belong to a party, Democrat or Republican.
Yeah.
And so there is a large portion of I have to pick a team and I have to choose with that team. That's why we typically see the skewing back and forth, the way back and forth is because everybody's unhappy with government.
Right.
And if you talk to any Democrat or Republican, everybody's unhappy with how the government is being handled. So the position in the party in power is usually I don't think that we would see such an unpredictability in polling and in the election cycle in general if we existed within a system where instead of voting for a representative, we're voting for ballot initiatives. And you look at that at state ballot initiatives, right? It's polling data on state ballot initiatives is a lot more accurate than political parties taking power.
Interesting. So you're saying more democratic than Republican.
Depends. Ballot
Representative
can go either way. Yeah.
I think it can go either way. I think that people typically know what the thing that they want to vote for, but then they have to attach that feeling or that emotion that they have or that policy they have to a politician.
100%. Yeah.
And at a moment's notice by our media companies. Like the polls that come out 3 months prior to the midterms or a general election are drastically different a week prior because I actually have to vote now or I am starting to vote. And whatever's happening in our immediate news cycle impacts that wave. That's why.
So on that point, I've told Tom about this before years ago on the podcast. In my county, I'm not trying to make this about Florida, right?
Oh, we're talking about Florida. Florida. Can we talk about Utah today?
Sure,
All
absolutely. In my county, they send out, my ballot. So I vote by mail, and they send it out well in advance. So I've got time to actually research every candidate and every ballot initiative. And I actually write that up and put it on my blog, right? So I'll put like links to every single candidate's website, a brief summary, not about their politics, because I'll say which party they are, right? But about like, where do they go to school? Are they a Tampa native, right? And like their family, some, just basic information that people might want to know about them.
Yeah.
And I put all of that on, and it takes hours, right? Because I'm doing research. I'm doing the research for me, but then I type it all up so other people can see it. So I do this typically like a month and a half before the election. As soon as I get my ballot, I will try as fast as I can to do it. So I'm done. So I think it can be useful for people. But then if you watch the hits to that website, every time I do this, I get 20, 30,000 views of that website, right? So I don't know that it's influencing how people vote, but it's informing people.
Sure.
The vast majority of those hits come the week before the election.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah.
So to your point, do you think people are really just not paying attention to elections until it's time to vote?
Absolutely. I think that the majority of the populace, it's not that they don't care, but we have enough going on in our day-to-day lives that I can't care until the last moment. Or maybe I don't have the mental capacity to care until the last moment. Those that do care tend to look it up and will make the effort, but the majority of the population, I don't think is looking.
How do you approach it, Tom?
They're seeing a number or a letter next to the name D or R, and they're voting based off of that.
Well, I'm sure there's some that do that, but like I actually agree with you in that. Two thoughts. One, when I'm always think it's fascinating during election cycles, especially the presidential election, when you talk about polling in the state, Iowa, he's leading by 2 points, and and they talk about that as if the whole nation or the whole state is being polled. It's this teeny sliver of hardcore Democrats and hardcore Republicans, right? And
typically
it's way less than even 10%. It's like this tiny percentage of the state that they're polling to get the primaries. And then they have to go to the general, and that's usually because they usually go way into their base, and then they go and then the general election. Then they go way center, they got to moderate, and it's like, but they skew it and make it look like everyone's in this, and you're like, they were just this tiny group of people that are actually deciding who's going to be the candidate for that state, so I kind of agree in that most of them are like. Most of the general public are not voting in those. They don't care. And
in primaries,
in the primaries, those primaries. So I agree with you that. And then the second one is this, and I had to admit this, is that like just even the midterms, right? We do the mail-in ballot, so I'm doing it like a week or so before. But
so you're committing voter fraud.
Why?
Because you're
but I'm feeling that, and there's like the big ones, and I definitely thought about those, but then we get down into like should we re-elect Judge so and so, and you've
never heard of this person,
right? And you're like, I don't know, and you feel a little bad. You're like, sure or no. I don't even know my neighbor's name, let alone the judge. And you like, and even like his. My wife she's in a certain, she knows candidates and stuff. I'll be like, do you know what about this thing or this thing, right? And she'll be like, oh yeah, I know this, and because you're just like, I don't know anything about this, and I'm a pretty informed individual and are pretty up to date on a lot of what's going on the local politics as well as the general as the national politics, and so it's. So the regular Joe Schmo guy, right, that's just like not into it all, I'm sure he's like, whatever. If he even votes, right, that he's just going to be like, it might be just R's or D's, right? Who knows?
Go ahead.
I would say, and this is exactly why the Republicans lean so heavy into culture war topics and reactive, emotionally charged
approaches,
rather than policy, because it's much easier to get people to feel a certain way that my team is or does, whether that's true or not. How they vote.
Both sides are doing this, right?
Democrats are doing it as well.
I
just would argue that Republicans lean into that culture war more.
Interesting. So I wanted to complicate this a little bit by suggesting that at least some voters are more sophisticated than we think they are.
I think most are pretty sophisticated.
You think so?
Well,
Because
most is a
we were kind of suggesting
word.
here that like people tend to vote party, right? Like they get their party,
Yes.
they know their party, and they're going to vote that. And the only reason why I'm saying that they might be a bit more sophisticated is one part of the midterms, but prior to that, in Kansas, they did have this ballot initiative that basically made it so abortion is protected in Kansas. I don't know if you guys remember this. This happened over the summer.
Yeah, right
And it
around
passed
where all the Roe v. Wade stuff was happening.
overwhelmingly, right? Over 60% of Kansan voters
Mhm.
supported keeping abortion legal in the state, even though that state is very heavily Republican,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And then if we look at the midterms, there were 3 or 4 states that had abortion ballot initiatives
Mhm.
on the ballot.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering to what extent, and I should have probably looked this up, right? But I'm wondering to what extent in those states where something about abortion was on the ballot, how Republicans voted for that and then went back to voting for the Republican candidate. Do you see what I'm saying? So
Sure.
I wonder to what extent voters are sophisticated enough to know, you know what, on this one, I actually favor, making
This,
abortion, like keeping abortion
Sure.
legal, but I'm going to vote a straight R ticket on all the candidates.
Hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
I think
because
Sure.
we've seen this happen. Like this year, it's been happening.
I think that supports my statement earlier of when we're talking about policies on an individual policy level,
Mhm.
progressive policies are overwhelmingly popular
They're more
in the
popular,
US.
yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that progressives or that the Democrats are overwhelmingly popular.
Hmm.
But the policies that typically get associated with the Democratic Party
Tend to be more.
tend to be more popular.
Thoughts?
Well, to support that, like
To support the Democrats?
to support that idea,
Of good sophisticated voters.
or just what you're saying is like
Yeah.
I'm totally pro-choice, but
Oh, I did not know that.
as a on a political standing,
Hmm.
I am adamantly pro-life on a personal standing.
Okay.
So if that does that make sense? Everyone should be able to choose for themselves.
Right. So he's not
But-
going to force his views on somebody
I'm not
else.
going to force my views on somebody else.
Very
But
libertarian. of you.
but if you ask
Yes.
me my opinion or something like that, yes. View of like
How most pro-choice, I say most a lot. I think that's how a lot of pro-choice people are, is that I may feel one way about what I would personally do or what I think other people should do, but giving somebody the right and the choice to be able to do something is a different
Yeah.
story.
right, exactly, and that's what I think that almost lends to. So in that sense, right, like I'm very progressive, right, and I'm like, yeah, I think everyone should have the choice, but I also think you should have the choice to carry guns, and you should have the choice to do lots of things.
I'm also pro-gun.
But I don't own a gun, and I don't own, and I don't.
I like
own
the
a-
look that Ryan's saying.
So I'm just saying, so like, I don't necessarily mean that means that everyone is progressive. It's
Sure.
just they might have more conservative views, but they're okay with other people
Yeah.
doing the,
Making their own
making their own decisions. Exactly.
We as humans like to categorize things in people, right?
Mhm.
And back to Ryan's point earlier of like, we have to categorize people. That's how we keep track of things.
We do.
But people are more sophisticated, voters are more sophisticated, and people are more nuanced than just, I am a Republican, so I'm going to vote for everything down ballot Republican. So
Mhm.
I think that's a really good point of we have to pick teams to a certain extent in the way that our political system operates in the United States, but most individuals are not a Republican or a Democrat.
Yes, 100%.
There are tons of moderates and independents in the US.
Yeah, well,
But I have to pick a team.
there's some bad news. I was reading about this actually.
I'm
that-
not a Democrat.
that people have actually if you surveyed 100 years ago, the views were actually pretty distributed as far as like, oh well, I'm pro-choice here, but I'm pro-gun. People are all kind of all over the place. Over the years, we've consolidated, and that so you basically have these groupings that are more what's the word?
Homogeneous.
Yeah.
Homogeneous or homogeneous. So basically, they all look the same within their group.
Yes,
So
right.
Republicans all look like Republicans.
And
now, instead
I
of
would
being
say
very-
that's the media's fault of like, oh, you're in this camp, so here's the thing that you now are for, and if you're
Yeah.
against them, and that's why I'm always like, I think it's so weird when we were like, We need, it'll be like a thing like we need a wall, right? And they're like, well, we're the party that's against the wall. You're like, really? You're like, or both parties do this, right? You're like, why are you on the opposite side of this? This doesn't make any sense, right? And you're like, because we are.
Because they're not.
Because they're not, right? Exactly. And you're like, why does there have to be, and like, I wish there were 10 camps that we could choose from, right? And then I think we'd have better results. Because and this is the thing I've always annoys me is you're like, okay, we're coming up into a presidential election, right? And you're like, I'm not thrilled about Trump. You're like, what are my options?
Hillary Clinton.
Or Kanye, right? And you're like, you know what I mean? That's what it really is. And you're like, well, of course I'm not going to vote for either of those, right? Or, I don't want to vote for Trump. I don't want, but okay, you don't want to vote for Trump. We'll go to the exact opposite ideologically. Everything of course you're not going to go there. So you're like,
peel this back if this is getting to a different topic.
Okay.
But that's why I think that most people. Oh boy, that's something that maybe you don't want to say now. A year ago, it's kind of like that didn't age well. Yeah, no, and that's why you're a Republican. Okay, so okay,
but I'm just saying, well,
so ranked
two parties is better than no.
Well,
yes.
First past the post is the problem, right? But it's the winner take all system, and really what we need is a proportional representation system. And we had this. The way that we structure our system is first past the post. Whoever gets the majority wins the whole thing.
Yeah.
Where what a lot of parliamentary systems do is it's proportional representation. If you get more than 4% of the vote, you get a representative, and then you get to pick who the representative is going to be.
For sure.
Right. And that does lend to then your vote is not wasted.
Right.
Right. So even the ranked choice voting, it's still first past the post because one person gets the whole thing.
This is kind of really broad, but this is one of my fundamental political philosophies and visions is a young person. I wish that as a society and as a government, we were willing to reevaluate our systems more than we are. Yeah. Because when the US was founded, sure, it was this great experiment, which innovative. There were a lot of problems with its founding, but there was this great experiment that seek to do something different. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the Constitution is overwhelmingly a good document. It has a lot of flaws, a lot of problems, but our inability and our unwillingness to look at these documents and these systems and go, this isn't working in our modern system and popular system anymore. We need to reevaluate and change that.
Well, and I think
I don't know if most people would agree with
states, right? There was supposed to experiment, right? You got 50 states. Oh, look, Alabama's doing it this way, Michigan's doing it this way,
sure.
and you're seeing results, right? These are good results or bad results, and you can start evaluating and be like, man, we really should start doing what Michigan's doing or whatever, right? And what's interesting is you got Democrats and Republicans in those. They're all two party, right? And isn't that strange? And I don't like. It's so
this
weird.
Disjointed thing
it's entrenched interests. Once you have power, why are you going to change it?
Exactly.
They have the power.
Yeah,
they're not going to change that.
And
it swaps between two apart,
right?
Which we just saw with our first point today. Both were willing to bust the unions when it came down to what's in their best political interest.
Yes. It's this pendulum of power that in a way we almost have a one-party system, right? With the illusion of two parties.
Yeah, we're coming to an agreement. Power is pernicious. It is inherently corrupts.
It's pernicious.
Which Lenin wrote about a lot in his writings, but we won't get into Lenin.
That's fine. Okay. Any other thoughts on our topic there? Or, I don't know that anybody has the answer. No. I think we're kind of speculating.
There wasn't anything necessarily to agree with, or disagree with, but we both know that the system's not working.
Yeah.
The current way that we're pulling data is not working.
Yeah. Well, even to get more philosophical at it, it's almost annoying that, exactly what we're talking about. It's this illusion of two parties of it's so funny that we're like, oh, it's the midterms, so the other party has to take it back, right? Because this is the way it works. And guess what's going to happen on the next midterms when a Republican's in office? I'll let you guess, right? And you're like, predictable. They're like, and everyone's like celebrating, like we won some, like Republicans, right? Oh my gosh, you look, we didn't win anything. This is gonna just reverse right back the next time, right? It's like it's almost pathetic, right?
Yeah.
That you were like, we're winning. No one's winning anything, right? It's like you're saying,
it's running a candidate like Herschel Walker, and if Herschel Walker won, being like, we won with Herschel Walker. Oh,
Well,
Democrats
yeah.
did too.
So other thoughts before we do, one of our regular listeners said, they like Tommy's take and now they want Ryan's review.
Oh, Ryan's review. I like that.
Which I don't know that I'm going to
That's
necessarily
right.
pull a Ryan's review.
Ready for Ryan's review?
Yeah. Okay. So I think I've kind of recapped the positions already. So I just thought of something that I saw talk about, which I thought was kind of interesting. And maybe this can lead to just a really brief discussion at the end. He said, the way that our system does work is problematic. Like you just said, and I think we all agree that it's problematic because it is a pendulum that swings back and forth. But kind of what his point is it's a really inefficient democracy. But what it does is it allows both sides to basically not get anything done. Right.
Yeah.
So, because what you have is like, you've got this very short window of 2 years where Biden has all the house, he's got the House and the Senate, and he's controlling the executive branch. So he can push a few things through, and then immediately we lose a House, right? So the House is gone. Now what's going to actually pass, right? Like it's just going to be a stalemate, but it forces at some level certain things like a budget, they're going to have to negotiate.
Sure.
Right? Because it's mixed now. So the way that it's structured forces negotiation, but it's slow.
Yeah.
The whole system is slow. And we're both like, all of us are saying it's broken, but what is the alternative, right? Because right now, and we did talk about it, right? Socialism. but his point I thought was pretty good, that like it may seem broken, but it's intentionally designed to make sure that no party is ever going to have ultimate power. It's going to continuously swing back and forth, and it's going to be a broken, slow democracy.
It's a big checks and balances.
That's very deliberative
kind of thing,
Yeah,
and which is
problematic.
right.
The checks and balances work for the most part.
They do.
Well, I think most of us would agree. It's not perfect. It's broken. It could be better. But I think that we're so focused on I feel like we're so focused on the party system not working. And I know I pointed to this earlier. Democrats, Republicans, that system isn't the way that most Americans want. But I think the thing that never gets talked about is the economic system that you and I vehemently disagree on, is capitalism versus other options.
Right.
I'm pro-socialism, but I am absolutely a socialist, but that is the system that nobody gets to vote on because we're busy voting upon parties, right? It's just whichever party. Both parties are capitalist parties at the end of the day.
Liberal literally means liberal economic policies. That's literally what it means. That's why I don't like calling them liberals, because they're really progressive. So anyway, thoughts on that issue of like a broken democracy, but it's actually effective.
Yeah. Well, so like, what's a really efficient government? A dictatorship.
Absolutely.
You get stuff done. Very quick.
You're like Hitler, like, hey, you know what we need? Autobahn. Boom. And like, we built an Autobahn and it was amazing. Yeah. He also had some other ideas that didn't age well. And so it's like, yes, intentionally inefficient and keeping each other it's like almost keeping each other in check, keeping them from not polarizing too much, right? And so, like, that's great. That's like, what's worse than a two-party system? A one-party system, right? And it's like, but we will never get we'll never get out of a two-party system unless we change our voting, which is like a CRT or what is it? Not CRT.
Ranked choice.
Ranked choice.
Yeah. IVR. Runoff voting? IRV. Yeah.
Okay.
And then that kind of, ranked choice.
Some alternative system. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, and so I actually think we should be focusing on those kinds of rehabilitations of the
system.
Yeah,
agreed.
And then that would change, but you're always going to be working against the interests of the entrenched, right?
Yeah.
So
that is tough.
Yeah.
No, you look at policies that some politicians are really talking about wanting to pass right now, and that's putting limitations in Congress about stock trading. You've got both the right and the left that are united on that.
Yeah.
We've got who's the senator that has been really McCarthy, who's really been talking about that.
Do you think that'll pass?
No, absolutely not. Because it's
They make way too
against
much
the
money.
interest
Right,
of the people
there.
who are voting
It's
for
like,
it.
Same with the Supreme
Terminal
Court.
answer.
So they were just talking about the Supreme Court has no ethical guidelines that they actually have to follow.
Hmm.
So other judges, like federal judges do, like in House and the Senate, they all do. But the Supreme Court has like they don't really have anything that guides them.
Yeah.
They don't have to deal with conflicts of interest. They don't actually have to. They're the ones who write their own code.
Yeah,
and
you
they're
can have
just
a
like,
wife literally implicit in the insurrection of the United States and still sit on the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
But
Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up here, right? I think that was pretty interesting, right? And a lot of agreement again. So
Yeah.
pretty common here. We're finding a lot of things that we can agree to critique.
here's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
I personally think that Tommy and I, when it comes to the actual political discussion, are going to find a way to agree a lot of the times to get into the economics. Because
So,
that's where Tommy and I
where
are
we
going
wanna
to butt
fight?
heads. If you want to
Okay.
fight, but I know we're trying to agree.
Well, honestly, these last couple, they've been like softballs to me of like things that you want to criticize. I'm like, this is easy
This is
to
easy.
criticize. Yeah, like there's gonna be. That's why I keep saying. Like,
I'll
you're
come
gonna
up with
come up with something.
some
Like,
hardballs.
like,
Holiday
yeah.
season.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Catch us next time.
Tom, look, we don't always agree when it comes to politics. But if there's one thing that we do agree on, it's that there's only one way to clean up after going to the bathroom, and that's with a Lux bidet.
Listen, I've been using bidets forever, all right? And Lux is the best, all right? So, I mean, I've got like the little squatty potty thing and the bidet. It's like a whole experience. It's actually, it's probably one of the highlights of the entire day. But like, it gets me clean and it gets me ready to talk politics in a civilized manner.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. Every time that I use a toilet, it doesn't have a bidet. When I go to a friend's house, I just don't use their toilet, first of all. But that's about as uncivilized as it gets. So civil conversations demand civil hygiene practices.
That's why everyone should get a bidet.
And just to be clear, right, we want to make it clear, listeners can get their own Lux bidet with 10% off by ordering at luxbidet.com and using our promo code FCBG10, Finding Common Battlegrounds 10. And the last thing that we want to say, Lux is supporting this podcast, but they don't support one side or the other. They support civil conversations and clean butts.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Finding Common Battlegrounds. The music is by Ben Sound. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and not those of their employers. For more information or more episodes, you can find us at findingcommonbattlegrounds.com.